The dawn broke cold over London. A thin mist clung to the stones of the tower, softening its cruel edges. Some said the sky itself wept, though no one dared to look up long enough to see. Inside her chamber, Anne Boleyn rose quietly. Her ladies knelt, trembling, unable to meet her gaze. She smiled, not the smile of a queen, but of a woman who had already made peace with the world. Her gown was gray, French silk, modest and simple. Her dark hair was bound beneath a linen cap. Gone were the jewels, the rubies that once shimmered at her throat. She had worn a crown once. Now she would wear faith. For a long moment, she simply stood by the window, her fingers resting on the cold stone. Outside, the morning fog drifted across the Thames, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and river silt. Somewhere beyond that gray horizon, bells were ringing. Not for her, not yet, but for the living city that would soon awaken to its own uneasy conscience. She whispered a prayer beneath her breath, her lips moving soundlessly. Perhaps it was for her daughter, perhaps for her soul, or perhaps for Henry, the man she had loved, defied, and lost. Her ladies moved about her in silence, fastening her sleeves, straightening the folds of her gown, smoothing her trembling hands. One of them, a young girl no older than 17, began to weep softly. Anne reached out and touched her cheek. "Do not cry," she said gently. "I am well." Her voice carried no bitterness, no fear, only calm, the kind that comes when a person has already crossed the threshold in spirit long before the body follows. On the small table beside her bed lay a white cloth, folded neatly, and a small prayer book worn soft at the edges. She had slept little that night, though she had tried. The stars had disappeared early, hidden behind clouds as if unwilling to watch what morning would bring. When the first light broke, she had risen to her knees. They said she prayed for nearly an hour, whispering the psalms of mercy, her voice soft but steady. Even the guards outside her door had fallen silent. They listened, as if the sound itself carried absolution. Now, as the bells of the Chapel Royal tolled through the mist, she turned toward the door. The hour was near. Beyond those walls, England waited, breath held, hearts divided. For some, she was the serpent who had bewitched a king and led him to sin. For others, she was the innocent dove crushed beneath the weight of a kingdom's wrath. But to God, she was neither villain nor victim. She was simply Anne, a soul returning home. She thought of her daughter then, little Elizabeth, with her red gold hair and solemn eyes. "Learn from this," she had whispered to her in her mind 1,000 times, "but do not let it harden you." No mother should have to teach her child about survival through her own death. Yet that was what she left behind, the lesson of endurance. A knock came at the door. The lieutenant of the tower entered, his head bowed low. His armor caught the gray light and turned it dull. "My lady," he said softly, "it is time." She nodded. Her ladies wept again, but Anne did not. There was no trembling in her hands, no falter in her step as she followed him. The long corridor echoed with their footsteps, slow, deliberate, eternal. As they passed the chapel, Anne paused for a moment. Through the narrow slit of a window, she could see the altar candles burning low. Her eyes lingered there, on the light, on the memory of sanctity. "Jésus, receive my soul," she whispered. Outside, the courtyard awaited. The air was sharp, the kind that makes each breath feel like glass. Crows stirred along the tower walls, black against the pale sky. In the distance, she heard the faint clatter of hooves, a rider leaving the city, perhaps carrying news that the Queen would die today. And in that thought, she found peace. Because there was something strangely beautiful about knowing one's final hour. It stripped away the noise, the vanity, the crown itself, leaving only truth. And truth, she thought, was the one thing they could never take from her. For a fleeting second, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of roses. It reminded her of Hever, her childhood home. The orchards in spring, her father's laughter, her sister's voice calling across the fields. Life had been so simple once. She had not known that love could become so costly, but she had chosen her path. And though the road had led her here, to stone and silence, she would not curse the journey. For once, she had been loved by a king. And once, she had believed that love could change the world. Now, standing at the edge of that belief, she chose something greater: grace. Anne turned her face toward the gray light. Somewhere, the bells began to toll again, slower this time, deeper, like the heart of London itself was beating in sorrow. And with each note, she felt herself let go of another earthly tie, her crown, her past, her fear. By the time she stepped into the courtyard, she was no longer the woman they condemned. She was the woman they could not destroy. Anne Boleyn, daughter, mother, queen, and soon, a name whispered forever through the corridors of time. Once, long before the tower's shadows claimed her name, Anne Boleyn walked among sunlight. The court had not yet turned its whispers toward her. Her laughter filled the halls. She was young, clever, graceful, a flame in a world ruled by stillness and men. From France she had returned, carrying the scent of foreign roses and the art of charm. Her eyes, dark, alive, knowing, could undo a man faster than a sword's edge. And when she looked upon Henry Tudor, it was not fear she felt, but destiny. He was England's golden lion, powerful and proud, yet restless beneath the weight of legacy. Catherine, his queen, had grown gray in years, her womb silent, her prayers unending. But Henry's heart, long buried beneath duty, stirred again, drawn by Anne's voice like song. In her, he saw not only beauty, but defiance, the fire he lacked within himself. The court watched, uneasy, as the king's eyes began to follow the lady in black. One by one, the courtiers shifted allegiance, for power always leans toward the rising flame. Yet Anne would not yield easily. She would not be mistress to another man's crown. She held her virtue like a banner, refusing his touch, his gold, his whispered promises. That denial only deepened his hunger, for her and for freedom from Rome's heavy chains. When passion and ambition entwine, kingdoms tremble, and soon even the Pope would hear her name. Henry broke with the church, tore England from its ancient faith, to claim her as his own. Love became the weapon of reform, desire the spark that lit an empire's reformation. And when Anne was crowned in Westminster, the crowds roared, though half their hearts burned silent rage. For she wore not only jewels, but the blame of 1,000 broken vows behind her. She knelt before the altar, her head bowed low, her heart both proud and trembling. "God save the Queen," the heralds cried. But in the shadows, curses stirred like smoke. The Pope's wrath thundered from Rome. Europe watched as England crowned a queen born of scandal. Yet Henry, blind with triumph, saw only her smile, her hand resting upon her swelling belly, for within her grew promise, the long-awaited heir, the son to bind heaven and throne. The bells rang across London that winter, echoing through frost and faith and fragile hope. But when the birth cry came, it was a daughter's voice that filled the chamber. Elizabeth, bright, fierce, perfect, but not the prince the king had torn heaven apart for. And though he smiled for courtiers, something behind his eyes had quietly begun to fade. Anne felt it first in silence, the pause before he kissed her hand at supper. Then in whispers, carried by maids, by lords, by the soft steps of ambition. They said Jane Seymour's eyes were gentle, that her laughter made the king forget his crown. Anne laughed too, louder, brighter, But laughter, when forced, rings hollow in echoing halls. She who once commanded his world now felt the walls closing, inch by inch. Each miscarriage cut deeper, until hope itself became an enemy wearing a nurse's smile. She prayed harder, fasted longer, looked to heaven for mercy, but heaven was listening to kings. The same courtiers who once bent the knee now traded rumors like silver in the dark. Adultery, witchcraft, treason, words planted like daggers in the soil of her downfall. Her brother, George, brilliant, loyal, would soon share in her ruin by proximity of blood. The court became a stage, and every smile a mask, concealing another betrayal beneath. Henry's heart turned colder, his eyes heavy with guilt disguised as royal certainty. He wanted her gone, not the woman, but the mirror she held before his sins. When a king feels shame, someone must pay the price, and queens are easier to destroy. Anne did not plead. She wrote instead one final letter from her prisoned heart. She spoke not as a queen, but as a soul unafraid to face her judge. "Your Grace's conscience," she wrote, "shall be your own punishment, not my condemnation." Her words reached him too late, or perhaps they reached him and he looked away. For Henry feared truth more than death, and she was the only truth he'd ever known. The same hands that once lifted her crown now signed her fate with trembling grace. And in that moment, the empire he built upon passion began its slow, silent decay. Outside the tower, London lived on. Markets opened, children laughed, merchants shouted their wares. But beneath it all, something shifted, the heartbeat of a nation learning its cost. A woman had changed a kingdom, defied a pope, birthed a queen, and was unmade for it. And somewhere beyond those walls, the child she left behind stirred in her cradle's silk. Tiny fingers reached for light that had survived the storm that took her mother's crown. The rise was over, but the story had only begun to breathe its immortal truth. Anne Boleyn had fallen, yet in her fall, the world itself had turned. The morning of May 19th dawned pale and trembling, wrapped in silence, wrapped in fog. The tower's stones glistened with dew, cold as the breath of angels holding back tears. Inside her narrow chamber, Anne Boleyn knelt upon the floor, her hands folded in prayer. She had not slept, for sleep belonged to the innocent, and innocence was gone. Yet her eyes were calm, her voice steady, her faith shining brighter than fear's shadow. "Jesus, receive my soul," she whispered, as the candlelight flickered upon the iron-gray walls. The world outside stirred slowly, uncertain whether to breathe or to remain still in mourning. The guards waited beyond the door, exchanging quiet glances, unwilling to meet each other's eyes. Even the tower ravens kept their distance, restless, sensing the weight of history descending. For within those walls, a queen prepared to meet eternity with dignity as her crown. When the lieutenant of the tower entered, his armor whispered against the stone, soft, reverent. "My lady," he said, voice trembling with something like sorrow. "The hour has now arrived." Anne rose without hesitation, her hands smoothing the folds of her simple gray gown. Her ladies wept as they adjusted her sleeves, their tears falling like rain upon silk. "Do not grieve for me," Anne murmured gently, "for I go to a better world." Her words lingered in the air like the last chord of a hymn fading into memory. She embraced each of them, one by one, pressing courage into their shaking fingers and hearts. Then she turned toward the door and walked forward, her steps echoing softly through time. The corridors seemed longer that morning, filled with ghosts of laughter, coronations, and whispered betrayals. Through narrow windows, she saw the pale sun struggling against the mist that crowned the city. Every step she took was a farewell to power, to love, to the fragile dream of yesterday. As she neared the chapel, she paused, her eyes drawn to the faint glow of candles. She bowed her head and whispered again, "God forgive me, and bless my child, my Elizabeth." Then she moved on, her resolve unbroken, her spirit already walking the threshold between earth and heaven. Outside, the courtyard awaited, wide, gray, alive with silence that pressed against every soul. The scaffold stood draped in black cloth, solemn beneath the eyes of the gathered witnesses. The French swordsman, dressed in dark leather, waited motionless beside his blade of polished steel. He had come at the king's command, promising swiftness, mercy, and the grace of clean death. The crowd murmured faintly, uncertain whether to pity or to hate the woman before them. She climbed the steps slowly, each movement deliberate, her figure slender yet unshaken by dread. The wind lifted the edge of her veil, a ghost's gesture, tender and eternal. She turned then, facing the faces that had once cheered her coronation beneath golden banners. "Good Christian people," she began, her voice clear, serene, as if speaking from another world. "I am come hither to die according to the law by me adjudged." A murmur rippled through the crowd, hushed by awe rather than cruelty or contempt. Her gaze swept over them, steady, luminous, filled not with blame but with quiet forgiveness. "I pray God save the king," she said, "and send him long to reign over you." Even now she gave him grace, the man who had unmade her, because her soul was free. "Commend me to my Savior," she whispered next, "for my heart is clear of malice and deceit." Then she turned to the executioner, her eyes gentle as a child's before a trusted hand. Kneeling upon the straw, she tucked her gown beneath her knees to preserve her modesty. Her ladies could no longer contain their sorrow. Their sobs broke like waves against the stone. Anne lifted her face heavenward, her lips forming a silent prayer, her breath a final offering. The swordsman signaled softly for his assistant, his hands trembling with reluctant reverence and dread. He called for his weapon. "Boy, bring me the sword," to distract her for a moment. And in that moment, as she turned her head slightly, the blade sang its single song. A flash, cold, bright, merciful, and the world exhaled as silence filled the air. Her body fell forward softly, gracefully, as though curtsying before the throne of eternity. The executioner knelt, whispering a prayer for her soul, rare mercy from a hand of death. Her ladies rushed forward, gathering her remains with trembling care, their cries echoing through the courtyard. One of them lifted the severed head gently, wrapping it in white linen as if newborn. The tower bells began to toll, deep and mournful, each note a tear upon the wind. Even the soldiers lowered their gaze, their hearts heavy with the enormity of what they had witnessed. When it was done, the crowd dispersed, slowly, silently, as though leaving a holy place. The ravens circled once above the scaffold, then vanished into the gray London sky. A single red rose, dropped by a trembling hand, lay forgotten near the blood-darkened straw, and for a moment it seemed the very air itself had bowed in reverence to her. Within the chapel, her ladies laid her to rest beneath the altar, wrapped in plain white cloth. No jewels, no crown, only a crucifix resting gently upon her still and peaceful chest. The world would remember her as many things: temptress, heretic, martyr, but heaven knew better. To God, she was only his child returning home, her heart unburdened, her soul at peace. Outside, the city stirred again, unaware that it had witnessed the turning of an age. The wind carried her name across the Thames, whispering it through alleys, palaces, and broken hearts. Anne Boleyn, once queen, now legend, the woman who lost everything yet kept her grace. And in that grace she became more than a consort, more than a crown, immortal. The courtyard fell silent once more, save for the slow tolling of distant bells. Anne Boleyn's body lay still beneath a pale shroud, her blood soaking into the straw. The air hung heavy, as though the tower itself held its breath in mourning. No cheers rose, no cries of victory, only the faint sound of a trembling prayer. The French swordsman bowed low, whispering a blessing before vanishing into the gray London mist. For even those hardened by death could feel they had struck at something divine. Her ladies, faces pale as linen, carried her remains toward the quiet of St. Peter's. Each step echoed softly, as if even the stones were reluctant to bear such sorrow. They buried her not in grandeur, but in mercy, beside others forgotten, unnamed, unloved. Yet from that humble grave, history would draw one of its brightest and most haunting lights. Far above the tower walls, clouds rolled heavy across the morning sky, concealing the rising sun. London stirred again. Wagons creaked, merchants shouted, and children played beside the river's edge. Life resumed indifferent, as though a queen's fall were merely another rumor to survive. But something within the air had changed, a shift too subtle for the living to name. For innocence had been slain not by sword, but by the slow hand of ambition, and conscience, that most elusive of crowns, had begun to slip from England's gilded throne. In Whitehall, Henry dined that night beneath crystal chandeliers, laughter filling the vaulted chamber. His courtiers bowed and smiled, careful to match their mirth to the king's new cheer. Music drifted through the hall, lutes, flutes, and the faint rhythm of celebration and deceit. Jane Seymour, pale and patient, sat quietly beside him, her hands folded like unspoken promises. To the court, the message was clear. A queen had fallen. Another would soon rise. Yet beneath the golden canopy, Henry's eyes betrayed a shadow that no crown could hide. He drank deeply, but each sip carried the taste of guilt and fading absolution. For though he had buried Anne, her voice lingered soft as breath in every corner of his soul. He dreamed of her that night, not as the queen he condemned, but as she once was. Laughter in the gardens of Greenwich, sunlight upon her hair, her voice teasing like spring rain. He awoke with a start, sweating, the echo of her prayer still upon his ears. But kings cannot repent, only rewrite, and so he turned his grief into royal decree. By morning he spoke of her no more, by noon he spoke of marriage anew, and by evening he smiled again, though something in that smile had hollowed into silence. In the tower, however, her presence lingered, not in flesh, but in memory's quiet fire. The guards swore they heard her footsteps at dusk, light as silk upon the stones. Some claimed her spirit knelt still within the chapel, lips moving in endless prayer. And when the wind howled through the corridors, it carried her name like a psalm. Anne Boleyn, sinner or saint, angel or flame, the woman who changed a kingdom's soul. For though her body rested in dust, her defiance had birthed a nation's new conscience. Across the countryside, the faithful whispered, uncertain whether to mourn or to rejoice. Churches once loyal to Rome now echoed with sermons in English, bold and strange. Bibles were opened where Latin once ruled. Choirs sang words once forbidden beneath cathedral vaults. It was as though her blood had seeped into the soil, feeding the roots of change. What she began in love, others would finish in faith, and others still in fire. For every martyr who would follow, every reformer who dared, bore a trace of her courage. The Reformation seed was watered by her tears, and by the mercy she gave at death. In Hever Castle, far from London's noise, her family mourned in quiet, dignified despair. Thomas Boleyn walked the gardens alone, his face a mask carved from grief and disbelief. He had gained everything through her, then lost everything because of her, and dared not curse fate. Each evening he placed a single rose upon the moat's edge where her laughter once lingered. The petals drifted out toward the horizon, carried by the current toward eternity's waiting shore, and somewhere, In a cradle of silk within a sunlit chamber, Elizabeth slept unaware. Her tiny hand curled around nothing, as though grasping the ghost of her mother's love. Those who saw her swore the child dreamed often, murmuring softly as if answering unseen prayers. In her, the world would one day see the echo of Anne's fierce and tender spirit. Though the crown had fallen into dust, its imprint would soon rise again upon her brow. For destiny, like grace, never dies. It only changes form, waiting for the moment to bloom. Years would pass, and the tower would age, but her story would not fade with time. Poets would write her name in sorrow. Painters would capture her gaze in trembling reverence. And when Elizabeth took the throne, the shadow of that May morning would rise beside her, not as a curse, but as a crown forged from her mother's faith and fire. Anne Boleyn had fallen, but her fall became England's awakening, her silence its most enduring voice. The crown lay in the dust, yes, but beneath it the roots of immortality began to grow. And so the tower kept her secret, not of death, but of rebirth disguised as ruin. For grace, once given, cannot die. It only waits to be remembered. Anne Boleyn, the Queen of Kings, the woman who turned her ending into England's new beginning. Years passed, and the tower stones grew old, their silence deeper than memory itself. The ravens still circled, black wings against a silver dawn, as if keeping vigil. But beyond those walls, England had changed, and so too had the heavens above. A new queen now walks the same marble halls where Anne once whispered her prayers. Her name was Elizabeth, flame-haired, fierce-eyed, a woman carved from her mother's defiance. They called her Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, chosen by God, unyielding as the sea. Yet beneath her golden crown, a shadow lingered, the echo of a mother's voice. When Elizabeth stood before her mirror, she saw not herself, but the ghost of Anne. The same proud neck, the same knowing eyes, the same fire no silence could extinguish. Courtiers bowed to Elizabeth, but in their eyes glimmered remembrance of another fallen queen. Anne had died nameless, yet her spirit rose again, reborn in the daughter she bore. What was taken in blood returned in flame, like spring after a long, sorrowful winter. The child they once called Bastarda now ruled the world her mother could only dream of. And in that reign, Anne's soul found justice, not in vengeance, but in destiny fulfilled. Elizabeth did not forget. She could not. History itself had been written in tears. When she knelt in the chapel of Whitehall, she whispered the same prayer her mother had. Not for power, not for love, but for wisdom and the strength to stand alone. The bells that once tolled for Anne now rang for her daughter's coronation day. The crowd roared, thousands of voices rising like the wind that once carried Anne's name. No sword could silence it now. No king could undo what faith had begun. For Anne's crown, once shattered, gleamed again, unseen but unbroken, resting upon eternity's brow. She had given England a queen who would never bend to Rome nor to man. And through Elizabeth, Anne's story became something greater than grief. It became grace itself. Her death had been an ending only because no one yet understood her beginning. Now the world saw her not as a sinner, but as the mother of sovereignty. The woman who fell for love had risen through time as a symbol of freedom. Every sermon, every anthem, every ship bearing Elizabeth's crest whispered her mother's silent benediction. And somewhere beyond the veil, Anne's spirit watched the world she had birthed from sacrifice. In the hush of dawn, perhaps she stood once more upon the tower's cold stones. Not as a prisoner this time, but as a queen walking toward her eternal coronation. The same wind that once chilled her face now carried her name across generations. Anne Boleyn, the Queen of Kings, not by crown or decree, but by the soul's endurance. For even when her body fell, her story did not. Truth rarely bows to executioners. It waits, patient and eternal, until the world learns how to listen without fear. And when it does, her voice returns, softer than prayer, stronger than empire, timeless as grace. They built their kingdoms upon her silence, yet her echo outlasted their crumbling thrones. She was never meant to be forgotten. The stars themselves seemed to know her sorrow. Each night, they burn for her, small, distant crowns adorning heaven's endless velvet court. And perhaps when Elizabeth looked to them, she felt her mother's presence in their glow. Not haunting, but guiding, a promise that love, even broken, can still redeem the world. For what is a queen, if not the heart of a people's remembrance? Anne had given them both a legacy of courage and the fire of an immortal name. So when the poets spoke of beauty, they used her name. When priests spoke of faith, hers lingered too. Not in defiance now, but in reverence, the kind born from centuries of understanding. She had changed the course of England not by crown, but by conviction's quiet flame. Even in death she had ruled, not through power, but through the faith she left behind. Her life had been brief, her fall swift, her soul vast as eternity's sea. The sword that ended her breath had only set her story free to the wind. And in that freedom, she became something rarer than any monarch before or since. A queen not made by kings, but remembered by the hearts of all who dream. Anne Boleyn, the queen who never truly died. The Queen of Kings, Etis Ernal. Her name still drifts through London's mist, through candle smoke and cathedral choirs. And when the bells of England toll, they do so not for sorrow, but remembrance. For every crown that glitters now was once forged in the shadow of her grace. The day her crown fell was not her end. It was England's awakening. And somewhere, in that fragile hush between history and heaven, Anne still smiles. Not the smile of victory, but of peace, knowing she was never truly broken. The world may forget its kings, but it will never forget the Queen of Kings. Centuries turned like pages, yet her name lingered, etched not in stone, but in spirit. In classrooms and cathedrals, in books and in hearts, Anne Boleyn refused to fade away. Painters tried to capture her beauty, poets, her sorrow, but none caught her truth entire. For Anne was never just a face or fate. She was an awakening, disguised as tragedy. Every generation finds her anew, in rebellion, in faith, in the unyielding pursuit of self. Her story is not confined to Tudor walls, but breathes through every woman who stands tall. When history whispers of betrayal, courage answers back, and its voice sounds like hers. She taught the world that conviction has a price, yet also a glory beyond measure. That to lose everything for truth is to gain the one thing no crown grants, eternity. In her, the fragile and the fierce became one, a harmony kings could neither command nor kill. And though centuries have buried her bones beneath marble and time, her soul walks still. Each dawn that gilds London's spires feels touched by her, delicate, defiant, divine in silence. The city breathes her name not as lament, but as hymn, soft, steady, everlasting. Anne Boleyn, the queen who fell to rise beyond all queens, unchained, undying, unforgotten. Sometimes, when the river mist creeps over the tower, the past feels perilously near. Tourists murmur, cameras click, yet beneath the noise hums something holy and unseen. The earth remembers, the air remembers, the very light seems to bend in reverence. It was here that love became legend, that faith was tested and found faithful still. For though she walked to her death, she never walked in despair, only in surrender. And in that surrender lay the strength no sword could ever sever or silence. The executioner's blade cut clean, but not deep enough to reach the immortal within her. For immortality is not granted by kings. It is earned in the heart's quiet endurance. Anne's spirit, tempered by fire, rose into the fabric of England's very soul. She became its conscience, its memory, its mirror, a queen beyond the measure of flesh. Even Henry, long buried in his vault of iron, could not escape her ghost. His legacy dimmed in her light, his triumphs turned hollow beside her unyielding grace. For power fades, but truth remains, and her truth has outlived his crown, his realm, his name. Anne Boleyn reigns still in the place where time and faith entwine, eternity's court of kings. And if one listens closely, when the wind sweeps over the Thames at twilight's fall, it carries a whisper, faint but clear, like the echo of a vow never broken. Not of bitterness, but of peace, the peace of one who finally understood her purpose. For all her striving, her love, her loss, it had never been in vain. The Reformation she kindled lit torches in minds that would never again be darkened. Her daughter Anne's reign forged an empire whose heart beat to the rhythm of her mother's courage. The scriptures she defended were read by those who never knew her name, yet lived her legacy. And thus, Anne's prayer was answered, not by mercy, but by remembrance that could not die. She had asked only that God remember her, and he did through the centuries unbroken. Each retelling, each breath of her story is a resurrection, gentle, reverent, and eternal. For she lives wherever truth defies tyranny, wherever grace triumphs over fear's long shadow. She lives in the faith of those who kneel and the fire of those who rise. Her death was but a doorway, her silence but a song only heaven could complete. Anne Boleyn, beloved, betrayed, redeemed, the Queen of Kings, forever in God's light. So now, when night falls on London and the tower fades into shadow's embrace, look toward the chapel where she once prayed and listen beyond the tolling bells. You may feel her there, calm, radiant, watching, as though she never truly left. The candlelight flickers against the ancient stones, and for a moment, time stands still. In that stillness, one can almost hear her final words. To Jesus Christ, I commend my soul. And there, in that whisper, lies the secret of her immortality, the grace of her crown. It was never gold that made her royal, but the courage that forgave even as it bled. The strength to love through betrayal, to believe through darkness, to die without fear. She was not a queen by man's decree, but by the quiet will of heaven itself. And so, when the wind rises over England's fields, it still carries her benediction. A blessing to all who suffer for truth, who dream despite the cruelty of the world. For Anne Boleyn's reign was never over. It merely changed form from throne to eternity. And in the hush between two heartbeats, history still kneels before her name. Anne Boleyn, the Queen of Kings, her crown fallen once, but never truly lost. Beneath the centuries, her story breathes, not in marble, but in the marrow of time. Every whisper of silk in Westminster, every candle flicker in the Tower, recalls her spirit. She became the quiet defiance beneath England's grandeur, the pulse behind the crown itself. In Elizabeth's reign, scholars and poets dared to speak her name again, reverently, carefully. They saw not scandal, but prophecy. A woman who birthed the modern soul of England. The faith she lived by, the truth she died for, had taken root in history's soil. And from that root, a new age flowered. The age of reason, light, and liberty. Anne's sacrifice had not been in vain. Her ashes had become the foundation of tomorrow. Even her enemies' descendants would walk beneath her legacy's shadow, their hearts stirred by her courage. No king could claim that glory. It belonged to her, the queen who rose from ruin. Every nation needs a martyr to remind it that power is not always divine. Anne was England's flawed human radiant proof that faith and love outlast all earthly thrones. The tower that once caged her became her cathedral, its silence echoing with her immortal psalm, and each dawn that paints London's sky with gold seems to whisper her name anew. Elizabeth reigned long, wise and unyielding, yet even her glory bowed to memory's grace. For behind her triumphs, behind her throne, walked the unseen figure of her mother's strength. When ambassadors spoke of the Queen's intellect, they praised the daughter, but felt the mother's fire. When Elizabeth faced rebellion, her resolve mirrored the woman who had once faced execution. They were bound by more than blood. They were bound by destiny's hand, carved from the same stone. Anne had been the spark. Elizabeth, the flame that set an empire alight with purpose. And when the Virgin Queen declared England free of Rome's dominion, the circle was complete. Her mother's cause, once condemned, now crowned the realm in righteousness and sovereign pride. It was as if heaven itself had rewritten the verdict passed beneath the tower's gray walls. Through Elizabeth, Anne's soul was vindicated, not by vengeance, but by the fruit of endurance. She had given birth not just to a child, but to a nation reborn in her image, a kingdom of thinkers, dreamers, and believers, her true heirs, scattered through the centuries. And even now, their voices carry her memory in every song of freedom ever sung. Anne Boleyn, once broken, now infinite, the queen whose fall became her ascension. In the quiet corners of the tower, her ghost lingers, not to haunt, but to bless. Visitors who tread the scaffold stones feel a hush, a reverence beyond words or reason. Some say they hear soft footsteps at dawn, silk brushing the wind, a faint sigh of peace. Others swear the air itself grows warmer, as if touched by grace made flesh once more. Perhaps it is her, not as a spirit chained, but as light passing through time's veil. Each year on May the 19th, roses bloom red where the axe once fell. No gardener plants them, yet they come, silent, defiant, beautiful, as if heaven remembers, for heaven always does. It forgets no courage, no sorrow, no woman who loved too greatly. And when the bells ring at sunrise, they seem to toll not for death, but resurrection. She lives in every soul that dares to speak truth, even when it costs everything. For that is what Anne taught the world, that faith is not obedience, but conviction. That love, when true, cannot be buried, not by kings, not by centuries, not by time. The wind that brushed her cheek on that final morning still carries her promise forward, and somewhere within that breeze, her whisper endures. I was and am the Queen of Kings. Her story does not end with silence. It begins there, where words cannot follow. In the heart of every woman who dares to dream, her fire burns anew. In every daughter who refuses to bow, every soul who stands unbroken by fate. Anne's legacy is no longer bound to a crown, but to the courage to rise. The world may call her tragic, yet tragedy fades when faith transforms sorrow into song. Her life, brief as a candle's flame, became the dawn that never truly dimmed. And though her crown fell once into dust, her spirit still reigns, untouched, undenied, eternal. For history belongs not to the kings who ruled, but to the hearts that endured them. Anne Boleyn endures, not as a fallen queen, but as the soul of a kingdom reborn. The tower bells toll again, softer now, carrying her name across centuries of prayer and rain. And in their sound, the world remembers her not for how she died, but how she lived. With faith unbroken, with love unafraid, with a grace that defied both man and mortality, the woman who changed a kingdom still stands, unbowed, in the quiet of every dawn. Anne Boleyn, forever and always, the Queen of Kings. The night settles over London like velvet, soft and solemn, heavy with remembrance's breath. The tower sleeps, yet the stones beneath it hum with something living: memory, faith, grace. In the quiet air, between the echoes of time, a whisper still remains. Not of sorrow, but of triumph. The soft, unyielding music of a soul redeemed. For though centuries pass and kings rise and fall like waves upon the shore, Anne's story endures, not as tragedy, but as the triumph of spirit over sword. The world remembers her not for how she fell, but for how she stood, for the fire she carried in her heart, the calm she found in death. She taught the ages that love and faith are not broken by fear's hand, that grace once born cannot die. It simply changes form, light becoming legacy. And now, her light burns on, in words, in women, in the will to endure. Through Elizabeth's reign, through faith reborn, through the quiet prayers of nameless generations. Anne's soul moves still, a queen not bound by tomb or time, but by eternity. For heaven remembers her courage and earth remembers her name, Anne Boleyn, forever crowned. The bells toll once more, distant, sorrowful, beautiful, their song no longer mournful, but free. They ring not for death, but remembrance, for the woman who became more than history. The wind rises, carrying her name through shadowed streets and across the sleeping Thames. And in that sound, faint yet eternal, her spirit whispers through the centuries, "I endure." Every crown that glitters owes something to hers, not gold, but the courage beneath it. Every queen who stands unshaken walks upon the road Anne once walked to her fate. She was the beginning of a world remade by faith, by love, by truth. And though her crown fell into dust, her light rose higher than any throne could reach. For some are born to rule, but others, like her, are born to awaken the world. Anne's name is not written in marble, it is etched in the heart of time. She was not merely queen, she was the spark that turned sorrow into salvation. And now in heaven's endless dawn, her crown shines brighter than it ever did on earth. Anne Boleyn, the Queen of Kings, the woman who rose, fell, and rose again forever. Anne Boleyn once walked beneath the tower's gray stones, a queen undone by fear, betrayal, and ambition. Yet even in her fall, she rose, in her faith, her courage, and the legacy she left behind. Through Elizabeth, her daughter, her story became immortal, her crown carried not in gold, but in the hearts of a nation. The tower remembers, history remembers, and we remember her still. Anne Boleyn, the Queen of Kings. Her crown may have fallen, but her story lives forever. Subscribe for more tales of courage, faith, and history that shaped the war.